some of the things that we've just released versus some of the things that we released right at the launch of the service, I think you're going to see a really gigantic leap in quality.
What kind of improvements are you seeing in this most recent round of content that is?
I mean, people are, filmmakers now sort of, and some of the production companies we're working with, now have a better understanding of, for camera placement, lighting. I'd say that, the post-production has, the post-production process and level of quality has gone up significantly. So whereas, previously you watch an experience and you'd be like, oh, there's a scene here, there's a scene here. Why is that head cut in half? I think that we're seeing less and less of that. And again, I mean, that all sort of, as the level of quality goes up, that allows you to really, retain the immersion and enjoy the experience, right? I mean, we have things that we've launched where, I'll watch it, and this is one of the benefits of 360. I mean, you can literally watch something 5 times and see it 5 different ways, right? Depending on what you're focused on.
Which leads me to an interesting question. I heard a rumor that you guys are sponsoring the Olympics this Olympics, and that maybe there's some VR content on the way. I don't know if that's top secret. You can talk about it. But
good plug. Samsung is a worldwide sponsor of the Olympics, and so the USOC recently kicked off their Road to Rio tour, because the Olympics are in Rio next summer. They kicked it off July 4th in Philadelphia, and they're going to have several events, leading up to the Olympics, just in different cities to get people excited. They'll have, various events. So we created 4 different 360 experiences focused on
ski jump.
No ski jump.
We'll save
that for the Winter Olympics.
Exactly.
So we focused on 4 different sports. So diving, gymnastics, pole vault, and women's beach volleyball. So they're roughly 2-minute experiences, and gives you a really kind of a quick inside look as to sort of what's going on in the athlete's head, how they're training, and sort of an inside view as to, in the diving experience, for example, with David Badaya, who won a gold and a bronze at the Olympics in London. You're literally, you're on the I think it's a 10-meter platform with him, right? So I think it's 3 stories up, and you're kind of hearing what's going through his head, and you're watching him execute, the dive from multiple viewpoints, and it goes in slow-mo. So it's a really cool inside look, and it's a great way.
Underwater?
What's that?
Underwater?
There's some underwater shots as well. Correct. And so those just launched last Thursday on VR. So if you have a Gear VR, you can access them now.
Sounds awesome, and hits on one of the larger topics that I definitely wanted to get to, which is just sports in general. I mean, you think about 360 content relative to the Olympics, it seems fair to say that could redefine what watching the Olympics is like. If it can, the sense of being there on a diving board, I mean, with that particular sport, that tension, right? It's all about the moment before they dive. How's it going to happen? And feeling like you're there part of the action in sports seems like one of the most natural places. I'm not a big sports guy, but just the idea of being there for physical competition, being close in proximity, feeling like you're in the midst of it, seems like it would make that much more emotional. So I'm wondering if you guys could talk about sports.
Well, I think the real big win for sports is accessibility, because we are in an ever-increasingly complex world, and we don't have the ability to drop everything and meet some of our old dear friends for sporting events. So I look to the advent of VR as an opportunity for us to create a social platform where if I've got a buddy of mine in Philadelphia and I'm in Los Angeles, we can go to the game together by just sitting down on the couch, strapping on our Gear VR, and watching a game, and and then we can sit there and we can trash talk each other while we're watching the game. That for me is a huge win, and I think that a lot of people are going to love that.
Gotta have the trash talk. How far off do you think that is? And without cutting off, Carl, if you had something to say about that, I was thinking that leads to the next sort of topic. How fast do we think this is going to happen? There's a lot of excitement. There's obviously a tremendous amount of interest, but realistically, how fast is this going to happen in what kinds of phases, relative to sports or otherwise? Carl?
Well, I think with technology in general, it always takes longer in the short term, and the impact is greater in the long term. So I think the Bill Gates quote is something like 2 years. The technology moves very slow over 2 years, but in 10 years, you won't believe it how far we've gone. I think that's the case with VR. We definitely, the early adopter market for VR is huge though. I don't think that's, it's not something we should ignore and say, oh, this is just for early adopters. The early adopter market is massive. I think it's definitely worth focusing on that because it's going to be, in my opinion, a good 5 years before mainstream, regular people like my mom are going to be using VR, maybe longer. But by the time we get there, if the early adopter community is going to iron out all the kinks, we're going to figure everything out, and it's going to be really awesome. I mean, just think how good has it gotten just in the past year. It has come so far. I mean, when we started these meetups, VRLA and SVVR,
DK1 all
we
around.
were using the DK1s, and we were like, this is amazing, this is so good. And now if you try to DK1 compared to the latest Crescent Bay or the latest Vive or Sony or the Gear VR, it's amazing how far we've come in a very short period. Although while we're here in it, we get very impatient. We're like, oh, it needs to move faster, it needs to move faster. But I think we're going really fast. A good 5 years before mainstream, but the next 2 years, 3 years of early adopter tech is going to be really amazing.
And we're headed towards input. It's happening, but that's not particularly accessible yet. I'm wondering if you guys could comment just in general about input. I want to knock through the rest of these questions. How important do you think that input is to adoption?
Well, I think that there's been a lot of recent griping about the lack of available input devices for VR, and I know that the community at first was thinking like an Xbox controller, why? That's so, all 2000s. But the truth is that it's already there. I think that having familiar technology early in VR development is really, really mission critical because you can't go from gasoline cars straight to electric cars overnight. You have to build that infrastructure overnight. You start with hybrid vehicles, and then you start popping in little charging stations along the way. So by the car analogy, in VR, you have to basically take something that is already familiar, that people are already familiar with, and then help bridge the gap to full-on responsive haptic gloves where you can just reach out and touch something. Now, to be clear, that's the goal. We want to be able to strap on our headgear, strap on our gloves, reach out, grab something, hold it, we can feel the resistance, and then everything becomes intuitive. If you want to use an elevator in a VR experience, you don't open your menu and say, use elevator. You just reach out and push the button. That's what we want. But we have a ways to go before we can get there. So as far as available devices are concerned, I'm all for it. And this will eventually allow us to make up for the catch up in the long run.
Yeah, some great points. I mean, you're effectively blindfolded, right? So how are you supposed to learn a new controller? Now, I think some of what's happening with touch and with Vive and with might be coming down the pipe with Samsung, who knows? It will be probably less difficult than you would imagine to get used to a new type of controller. But I think to your point, working with a gamepad that's packed in that we already understand, or an Xbox controller, I thought that was a pretty genius move on the part of Oculus that went overlooked by a lot of the development community, because if I know how to play an Xbox and how many tens of millions of people do, I can do it blindfolded. And it's a much shorter path to to get in, but enough about my opinion. What do you guys think?
No, I think that's a great move. I really do. You know, obviously I can't comment on what Samsung's thinking about, or what we're planning in the future. But Gear VR is meant to be sort of the mass market device, right? So that's why the controls were built into it. So we didn't want to have to force people to go out and purchase a gamepad if they didn't want to have to purchase a game. If you're not a hardcore gamer, you don't necessarily need to go out and purchase a gamepad. I mean, it's kind of an all-in-one. You've got the touchpad, you can tap, swipe. That's how you're selecting. Make it super simple, super easy. But as technology evolves and as the space evolves, correct. I mean, people you want the sense of touch. You want to be able to pick things up. I mean, that's a lot of times the first time people put the headset on, they've got their hands out, right? Because they want to instinctively you want to be able to touch something, and you feel like you should be able to touch something. So that's obviously sort of the natural evolution. So getting there quicker is obviously beneficial, I think, to VR in general.
So now, I don't want to miss this question because I think it's a really important one, and it's one that we're not talking about a whole lot. And that is, what about women? If we're talking about half of human beings, what about women? And it's fair to say right now, we've got an all-dude panel. VR is mostly for dudes, by dudes, and it feels very man-made. It's anti-natural in many of its incarnations. This is a difficult question to answer, especially because it's just a panel of guys, but I would appreciate if anyone has any thoughts on it. What do you think the tipping point is for a more equitable adoption and creation of this technology by women?
Well, I'll jump in because we've already sort of tried to address that a little bit. So in terms of our content programming for Built VR, we really worked to expand it. When we initially launched, we were focused on a couple key verticals: music, sports, action, and sort of travel or experience. Obviously, music can appeal to anyone, right? But we did a partnership with Refiner 29, which is basically a kind of an all-in-one fashion lifestyle website focused on millennial females. We did a fantastic series with them called Fashionably Bound, where it was 3 different friends going to 3 different locations. They went to Berlin, New Orleans, and Tulum. Refiner 29 has been great about bringing Gear VR to multiple events and showing that off. So I think that's female-centric content, right? I mean, that's not something. I mean, I can watch it and sort of appreciate it, but it's not really meant for me, right? So I think it's about ensuring. Again, I was talking about earlier about having a really wide breadth of content available. So I think that applies to not only entertainment content like video, but also games. And I'm not saying they need to be necessarily female-centric games, because obviously women can go play Grand Theft Auto if they want, or whatever. But I just think there needs to be. That just goes back to the point of having a really wide range of content that appeals to everyone.
And I just want to jump ahead, if you guys don't mind, to one other question to get it in before we do a little bit of Q&A, which is, what about quality ratings? What about dealing with the fact that, like Carl's saying, I'll do this experience once, I'll do it twice, but because a bad VR experience can go very bad in terms of the way it makes you feel, or it just isn't, it's underwhelming enough and it took enough time to do that you're not going back. I start to personally look at quality ratings, in a big way, but I'm already the guy who's searching Instant Watcher before Netflix. I wonder how you guys feel about how important those sort of standards and quality and like ratings and the ability to perceive it are to adoption, or if at all.
I'm personally against a very curated, where somebody else decides what experiences are right for me. I like the chaos of the kind of free market chaos that we get, but I think we do need a crowdsourced method of rating these experiences. Because you're right, a bad VR experience can ruin your day. I mean, I've had it happen where I've just been sick for a day because I tried, 10 minutes of the wrong VR experience where somebody, something was wrong in their code, and it just ruined my day. That's bad. We don't want that, and we definitely don't want that to be someone's first VR experience, because they'll always associate that with VR makes me sick, VR makes people sick. That's one of our biggest obstacles for mainstream adoption, I think, is that perception and the fact that it is based off of some reality. So I think that a crowdsourced rating system is really good. I don't want that to be government mandated or I don't want Apple deciding what VR I can do, like they do with regular apps. I don't want that for VR. That's really bad for VR, actually. It's too powerful a technology where if there's one company that controls what everyone can do and one set of, this is what is, acceptable. This type of content is not acceptable. This type of content is acceptable. Apple does. It's not transparent. That would be terrible for VR. I think we need to source the community. We have a very great, strong community of people that really care about VR, and I think that we can do something together.
Makes a lot of sense, the opportunity for both things, curated content by the big guys, and also the opportunity for people to really, in a democratic way, vote on the things that they care about, and to have that, the ability to sort by what their peers think in a legitimate way.
Yeah, I'd like to add on to Carl's comments. I think that it is going to be important for the big companies to curate their content because it's in their interest to protect their platforms and they're in the rights to do so. But for open VR communities, I think that there needs to be a crowdsourced methodology of sorting the good from the bad. But I would actually go further and separate. I would have two ratings. One rating to actually talk about the overall quality of the experience as it relates from an entertainment perspective. And then a separate rating for overall technical quality or comfort rating. If you
Does
will.
this break your brain?
Precisely, because the fact of the matter is that there are some amazing experiences out there that you just don't want to use on a regular basis because it will break you. But if you lump that in if you lump it together with the actual rating of the experience, then I think it's going to be very misleading because I might be dissuaded from trying an experience that's not I might say, oh, this is going to make me sick. But no. The reason why it has maybe 4 stars instead of 5 is because not everybody likes RPGs. So, separate the entertainment from the quality.
Cool. So I have to ask you one last question before we open it up to Q&A. I think if we pretended that pornography did not play a role in VR adoption, I know, elephant in the room, let's talk about it, come on, it's 2015, guys. If we pretended that porn didn't play a role in the adoption of VHS or the proliferation of the internet, we're just being ignorant. And the capacity for porn to enhance or to be a form of entertainment in VR is obvious to everyone. So my question is, what do you guys think is the relationship to that kind of content to mainstream adoption? How important is it? Do you think it's really going to drive it in the way that VHS did? Is it going to continue to be the elephant in the room? I mean, so far, it's kind of at the fringes. It's kind of under wraps. Like, what do you guys think of that?
I'll watch it.
Good answers.
Well, I don't know about driving adoption, but I mean, sure.
Beyond that, what do you think is going to be the thing that is a reason people buy VR headsets? And
It's
do you
good
think
enough.
it's,
I don't know.
No, look, I don't. It could potentially be a driver, but I don't think, people keep talking about this, what's the killer app for VR, right? I would argue that that's sort of not it. I don't think it's it. I don't think we know what the killer app for VR is right now. But I think there's a lot of different drivers, right? It depends upon what are you interested in watching. Because if you want to watch porn, maybe that's your driver, right? But it may not be, it's Costco's driver, so maybe that's a bad example. Maybe it's not Johnny's driver overbuying it, right? I don't know.
well, beyond our personal interest or disinterest, is it a thing that factors into mainstream adoption? That's really I wonder because it is such a has played such a huge role in these other, sort of adoptions, it isn't quite on the table for discussion. It clearly affects it. What do you guys think?
Well, I think this is something that we really need to simply talk about objectively. It is, it's a thing, it's real, and it's an issue that exists for adult entertainment the same way that that content for children exists for children. And the fact is that as an industry, we are obligated to create a way of managing how content is shared with the broader audience, to make sure that content for children is in a safe and accessible place for children. Content for teen is in an appropriate place that's safe and accessible for teens, and content for adults is in a safe and accessible place for adults. We know that this community exists, so it's up to us to regulate and moderate this content because it's in our interests to do so.
Yeah, I want to thank you for bringing this up, because it is a hard question to, it does make some people uncomfortable, but it's important that we address it as adults, I think, and just speak intelligently about it. And I'll just also add that I believe that certain problems that all VR faces are going to be solved first in that industry. Haptics, and just dealing with this whole uncanny valley issue of avatars. I mean, that's where the motivation is, the financial motivation is to solve the problem. And right now in social experiences, there's definitely an uncanny valley issue in a lot of cases, and we're still figuring out what can we do, how realistic can we make other humans. That industry is going to crack that problem before anyone else. So if you're doing anything with social VR and you're just not paying attention to learn lessons, even if it's not your thing, you don't have to do it, but just there are lessons to be learned from every little niche, and that's an important one.
Cool. So we've got time for 2 questions from the audience, and I'm really sorry to keep it to only 2, but these guys will be wandering around and I'm sure accessible for questions after the fact. Let's go over here. First hand line up.
So
Here, let's get you a microphone. Do you mind? So everybody can hear you.
360.
360.
So I don't know if any or all of you have seen Caprica. I actually thought it was a brilliant show from the perspective that it gave a perspective into futurism of where VR is going to go. So one of the killer apps could be argued it's going to be about avatar, so your personal presence within the VR.
Can you?
Within the VR,
yes,
within the VR worlds. So Xbox, others have created the ideas of avatars and such. And that's nice, but the reality is I think. And it's done pretty well in gaming, where you can actually customize your own avatar within video games. How do you see, and is it a near-term, 5-year, 10-year type of deal, where you can actually, at some point, finally have a presence, have your face rigging, so that when you're speaking, your avatar is speaking for you, et cetera, et cetera. So where do you see that?
Great question. Thank you. Who wants to tackle it?
I mean, I'll jump in. I think that's where we're going. I mean, for me, that's the dream is, to be an avatar in a virtual world where I can, look any way I want. I can look like myself. I can look like someone else, and interact with other avatars, which are other people. And there are things out there like Second Life, which is a great example. Something that's been going on for a good 12 years. There's a huge community there. It's very, people think it's dead, but it's actually still going strong. Huge community, hundreds of millions of dollars a year in their economy, and the biggest selling item in there is hair, skin, clothes. It's about customizing your avatar. That's what people are going to spend money on. It's going to be a huge chunk of our economy is going to be based on customizing your avatar in the future.
I believe though his question was like really eager about how far out till we feel like we have a true avatar presence. Do you have any sense of how long we have to wait?
Well, I think by and large, there's already a lot of stuff that is happening right now. I was privileged to work in collaboration with DreamWorks on an amazing project called Dragonflight in 4D, and we have film resolution assets from DreamWorks films that we used for this experience that had a full faculty of hands and face. Now, it was a scripted experience, but you should also know that there are lots of developers that are creating some amazing technology that can track muscular movements underneath the head-mounted display and translate that directly to your avatar. So I think that once to be clear though, this is the investigation of all these different methodologies of facial tracking and eye tracking. It's all current technology and it's all doable. It's just going to take development dollars, and the adoption of VR will fuel that endeavor. So if I had to guess, I would say that the next current install cycle of virtual reality consumer-facing gear will not have it. The next cycle will. Traditionally, cycles have gone in 3 to 5 year increments. So here's my money. I'm betting on 2019.
Nice.
Cool. All right, thank you. So we got one other question over here. Hand one up second.
Hi. So I have partially an aside and thought and partially a question. It was mentioned early in the panel that price was not necessarily going to be a barrier to adoption. That got me thinking, if we're talking 5 years ahead to mainstream adoption, it also got me thinking about adoption in the developing world. And it occurred to me that when you said that, the price was not an issue. I want to respectfully disagree with that because it occurred to me the less money that people have to spend, the more they're going to want to escape their life, right? And that got me thinking, you know, will there be multiple models, something like Google Cardboard maybe, or something more to that end for instance, opening developing world markets or lower price tier markets?
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Yeah, something that's crossed my mind as well. Cosmo, do you want to speak to that?
Well, I mean, we already have certainly like a range of, you know, devices from cardboard to the gear to the Vive, and, you know, all sorts of different quality levels. I mean, you are right in that it's, you know, price certainly is a factor in adoption, but I think my point was that when you look at the next 10 years of where these devices are going, the cost is going to come down. And so when you compare that to other factors, in my mind, it's not as big of a deal. But in terms of getting HMDs to developing countries, that sounds like a great startup idea. I don't know.
Yeah, you heard it here. Anyone else have an answer to that question they wanted to offer?
I think just the volume will bring the price down. I mean, it's like mobile phones. The mobile phone you have right now in your pocket, if they weren't selling at the volume that they're selling at, it would be thousands or tens of thousands of dollars for that much power and that much, technology. Just the more of these units we can sell, the cheaper it'll get. Cool.
So unless you have something to say, Jim, let's give a gigantic round of applause for those here on the stage. If you have a question